Another video. In advance, I would like to apologize if I lose my voice during the video. I'm battling with a really annoying cold. Luckily, it looks like I'm mostly over it, but just kind of warning ahead. So in today's video, I would like to talk to you about back training, and more specifically, I would like to share a couple of things that I have learned from maybe the autumn of 2021 up until now. So today, when I'm recording this, it's November 29, 2022. Because honestly, I can say that this was, after a very long time, the first big chunk of time that was just so educational for me. Of course, I always try to update my knowledge and learn new things, but usually at this point, it's only very slight refinements that happen in what I do. But in this case, really, I updated my knowledge to such an extent that actually it did fundamentally change the way I do things in the gym. Whether it's going to be like that for you as well, if I tell you about these things and you look some of these things up, ask other people, and maybe you confirm it to yourself that I'm right, that really depends on whether this whole developing your back and developing an impressive back has been a problem area for you like it was for me. If it wasn't, then it won't necessarily change what you actually do in the gym. But if it was, then yeah, I think this video could actually be very helpful for you. Now, just before I get into the video, there is three things actually that I want to mention. My hat is standing really stupidly on my head. I can see a little shark fin on top, but anyway. One is kind of just a general opinion that I have and a perspective I have that I want to share over people that try to optimize exercises, that try to select their exercises and movement patterns based on biomechanics and biomechanics research, EMG studies, those sorts of things. Because I see very big debates, various camps over this whole thing on the internet, and I just see a lot of hostility, which I find very interesting. My opinion over that is that if you're one of those people that gets irritated by this whole thing, and you're one of those people who goes there and comments things like, well, you know, bodybuilders have been doing really well without doing any of this fancy stuff, why overcomplicate things? The thing is that I get it, and I even agree to an extent. It used to be actually very frustrating for me, not only that people are trying to reinvent the wheel and it would seem like they are just going out of their way to find flaws in things which really don't really have any significant flaws, and clearly they have been working well. It would be annoying, and it would also be annoying that finally, just when I would think that, okay, I have the answer, then someone would come there and would try to basically make me second guess everything again. However, I really don't think that it's a good mindset to have, and that it's a good way to think about things, to just be completely cynical about it all and to ridicule every idea that's new and that is aiming to further optimize something that was already kind of optimal. I get it that it can be annoying, but just understand that if everybody had thought this way before throughout the history of lifting and fitness, I mean, man, we would still not have commercial gyms and machines, and we would not be doing leg presses, but we would be, you know, like lying on the floor and like somehow pressing a barbell up with our legs. Because as far as I know, that's how people used to do leg presses back in the day. So I think innovation will come from overthinkers, quote unquote, like this. So I think there's nothing wrong with trying to do things better, especially once again, if what you have been doing so far, which was the traditional stuff, is not yielding the types of results that you wanted and that you think you could actually have. The second thing is, unfortunately, when it comes to lifting, building muscle, and exercises, exercise selection, unfortunately, it just doesn't mean a whole lot if you go to a comment section where, let's say, somebody is saying that the narrow grip chin-up is the best exercise on the planet, or the whatever cable pullover is the best exercise, or the wide grip pull-up is the best exercise. When I see under these videos 150 comments that all say like, yeah, pull-ups worked for me like nothing else, that to me just doesn't mean a whole lot, unfortunately. It can be interesting just to see like what the majority says, because that probably means that if that exercise was not the best thing, it at least means that it was definitely not getting in the way of developing good lats in this particular example. Now, if you go to the video of the guy who said that pull-ups are not ideal, you will also see like 150 comments saying that, yeah, so-and-so, you're so amazing and you're so right. Pull-ups never did anything for me, but this movement, I mean, it lights my lats on fire. So I mean, then are both correct? It could actually be, but that's why when I'm opening a comment section and I see these comments, I mean, it's good for entertainment sometimes to get annoyed, but it's just not really informative in any other sense typically. And the thing is that when you hear this from people who have amazing physiques, let's say, it also doesn't tell us that much because, for one, the cliche of, okay, they have built a good back, let's say in this case with pull-ups, but could they have built an even bigger back? Or maybe they could have built that back faster with some other movements. That is something that we can never know. And secondly, I mean, especially when it comes to a muscle, like an area of your body like the back, where there's just so much overlap. Like you do any kind of vertical pull and you will train like 3-4 different muscles pretty effectively. You do a horizontal pull, you will also train 3-4 muscles pretty effectively. When you hear that, okay, like this particular movement did more for whichever muscle on your back than anything else, I mean, man, most probably you were not just doing that one exercise. Like you were doing like 4 or 5, maybe even potentially. Can you tell for sure that it was this movement that is responsible for your growth? I mean, it's very hard. And, if you're looking up the routines of famous bodybuilders, especially someone like Arnold, I mean, Arnold can say that he built his back with, wide grip pull-ups or narrow grip chin-ups or whatever, but Arnold did like 50,000 different movements for every muscle group. Can we really conclude anything from that? It's difficult. So in this case, I think using some biomechanics and things like that can be actually a useful thing. So with that, the first lesson I learned in this past year is that there is more to back development than just lats. Now, this obviously is not something that I just learned this past year. I knew that there are other muscles, not just the lats. However, the importance that I placed on other muscles versus the lats, or vice versa, that has shifted quite dramatically in this past year. Because I actually had a relatively rough time really kind of telling what was missing from my back. And I will show you a couple of pictures from my back development from, let's say, last year, the year before. And if I put that next to some guy, not like some absolute freak, because that will be just so much bigger and more impressive that you cannot even compare the two. But if you put my picture next to someone like a Brian Borstein, who, I mean, he has a phenomenal physique like all around. But if we just narrow it down to the back, I mean, what are some of the main differences that you see? Is it the fact that he's wider, which is, for example, what he would get from having much, much better lat development than I do? Yes, that is probably a part of it, but that's not the main thing, I would say. The main thing is what actually you could term thickness. It's those protruding shapes all over his back. And I'm not talking about acne. You're noticing all the upper back muscles. Under that, you're noticing, which I just like to refer to as those things on your back. It almost seems like 2 dinosaurs just laid some eggs under his skin. Those are at the middle. And then at the bottom, you also see that it's not a completely smooth back. Like there are some things that are protruding out. All of these are muscles which are really prominent if you look at someone from the back. The fact that you're wide and that you have these very impressive wings under your armpits, like reaching down all the way below your ribs, that definitely matters, but that's not all there is to back development. So basically, if you want to build an impressive back, and that's what I should have realized earlier on, more attention needs to be paid to the thickness aspect to all of this. Now, this is actually like a very big part of this big lesson that I learned, that there is more to the back than the lats. This is kind of one aspect to it, that the lats actually do play a big part in you looking thick. And so if you're looking at his lats, like those big triangle-ish shaped things on the side of his back reaching all the way to the middle, those things are his lats. But one thing that makes them so prominent is that his erector spinae muscles, basically his lower back muscles, you could call it that, are running all across his back, down from the very bottom up until much higher, and they actually run under other muscles, such as the lats. And basically, those push the lats out, making them a lot more prominent looking. So this way, the lats are not just spanning, sideways, giving you that width, but they're also protruding out more, giving you even more thickness. And Basically, this is one thing that I'm kind of coming to find now, that big lats without having really well developed erector spinae muscles are kind of like, okay, I almost made some nasty analogies here, but basically it's just a job incompletely done. You're basically not reaping the max rewards that you could from having those really well developed lats. And I would say that for me, actually, this is the biggest missing piece, and that is what I'm working on a lot. If you're following me on Instagram, you will see all kinds of videos where I'm doing these funky lower back exercises where I'm actually training my lower back dynamically. So I've actually been doing a lot of back extensions, Jefferson curls. The way I'm kind of doing it is sort of like the hybrid of a Romanian deadlift and the Jefferson curl, basically rounding, like curling down and up by actually rounding my back intentionally with weight, and that is hitting the lower back super, super well. Back extensions, again, by actually blocking the hip, not letting the hip move, and only moving with the spine. That is a great way to do this. And I actually think, and this is one big reason why I actually reintroduced these things, I think that doing heavy deadlift variations is actually important if you can do them pain-free and injury-free, of course. So I kind of stopped doing them for a while, but the thing is that it's very, very hard to train with a good amount of intensiveness and also with that progressive overload element if you're just doing these dynamic movements. Yeah, the dynamic movements are better for every muscle group from the aspect that it's actually dynamic and not just this isometric contraction. However, you will always be very, very heavily limited in how much weight you can use because it's just not a very safe position for you to be in. So like you can never really push the intensiveness of your training and that effort aspect of your training with these movements because you always need to have that extra bit of caution, which, I mean, obviously you still need to be cautious when you're doing hip hinges. However, that effort aspect and that progressive overload aspect will be there much more so. So I actually do a fair amount of volume for my lower back. I do like 12 to 15 sets just for the lower back every single week. Well, you know, I count hip hinges in this case as lower back work, not as hamstring work. So if you're doing RDLs, Romanian deadlifts, good mornings, and movements like this, I mean, you are training your lower back already a fair bit. And besides this, it's also important to realize that the upper back is not something to neglect. So actually, when you hear that, well, this exercise is not great for the lats, this is more upper back, that's good to know. However, just know that that's not a bad thing. It's not like hearing that, well, this is not actually abs, this is pure hip flexor. Like, that's not such a great thing. I mean, you do want strong hip flexors, but probably not as much as you want stronger and bigger abs. In the case of the back, like the upper back muscles are some of the first things that you notice immediately. I would say that in general, this is a good thing to realize that when you're looking at someone's back, like, yes, the width and the shape does matter. However, one of the first things that you will focus on, and everybody will focus on, is like what they see directly if they look forward. What you see in that case is actually the center of the back. So like if you like drew a line at your shoulders all the way down to your waist, I mean, those muscles there are, yeah, things like this lat erector spinae complex, rear delts, middle, lower, upper traps. Just know that, you know, if God forbid some exercise is not targeting the lats and the width aspect of your back as much as you thought, and they do maybe more for the upper back than you thought, it's good to be aware of that. However, it's not such a disaster because it still makes for a very good looking back. Now, second thing, and this is going to be a bit ironic since it's almost like I was shitting on lat training, that's really not the only thing that matters for developing your back. But if you do want to develop your lats, it's good to be aware of the fact, which I was clearly not aware of for a long time, is that it's not about pulling vertically or horizontally. I mean, these things will matter ultimately in some way, but that's just not the best way to think about it. The thing that I used to get wrong is that I was thinking that, okay, like shoulder extension, that's lats. So my arms are up here, I'm bringing them down, that is going to be lats. Yes, you will hit the lats that way. However, if you actually want to maximally stretch out the lats, which, I mean, a lot of you will know at this point that's maximal stretch, or not maximal, but the greatest degree of stretch that you can safely put on a muscle is going to be a huge factor in stimulating it, if not optimally, but very effectively. And the thing is that raising your arm up high like this when you're doing a dead hang is actually not the best way to stretch out the lats maximally. And this is one thing that I used to get very wrong. I think it's because I just didn't have any sort of mind muscle connection with the lats. And the lats are a muscle where I do think that this can be very, very useful to have that. With the chest, I mean, it's hard to even not have the mind muscle connection, and like the pecs will just work so well, even if you are not really aware of what's happening. Like it's basically impossible to bring your arms forward like this from a wide position without hitting your pecs optimally. With the lats, actually, like there's a lot of muscles that can take the brunt of the work this way. And so what I used to do is I would like do a chin up, complete overhand position at the end, a dead hang, and then pull myself up. And the thing is that if you had asked me at the time, do you feel that big lat stretch? I would have said yes. And I think this is what a lot of people feel as well, what I felt, because that's not really a lat stretch, and that is other muscles being sort of rolled up. So what I'm feeling now, actually, probably the biggest component of that is my upper traps being shrugged up to my ears. Yeah, like I can feel that something is pulling, or some muscle and the position of some muscle is very intensely changing. Like it's obvious. Okay, so the lats, yeah, I can feel it. That's the upper traps. Some other muscles, you know, like scapular elevators, lower traps, these muscles also stretch up. What's happening with the lats? The thing is, the lats are here. Like once you build a decent amount of muscle on your lats, you can like very easily actually tap them and even grab them. What's happening with them? I raise my arm up. I can definitely feel them moving, raising up until about this point. So if you're looking at me from the side, they're roughly in line with my ears. I can definitely feel them move. Even higher, at this point I didn't notice any movement almost. And here, yes, there is movement, but a bunch of other things are moving up with it. So I'm not even sure if it's really the lat stretching further, or basically just everything there, including the skin, is being stretched up. So that's what I'm feeling. I think that the same thing is happening, honestly, with a wide grip pull-up. When you're out here, like you definitely feel something stretching, but a lot of things are being stretched out, again, including the skin. The lats, not so much. If you're kind of putting your hand there once again and seeing what's happening to it. First of all, if you raise it up in the front, you can feel your lats moving a lot. If you raise it up to the side, I actually barely feel anything. And if I put it up there, there's just not a big stretch. But I think probably in part because these muscles are in the back and we just don't have the same connection with them as we do with other muscles that we can like easily tap. We see them as they are moving in the mirror. I think it's just very easy to conflate the movement and stretching and even contracting of other muscles with the lats. Now, knowing that, okay, that's not the lat stretching necessarily that you're feeling is not enough. You actually need to experience and feel it for yourself, how it feels like when the lat is really being stretched out. And I talked about this on a podcast with Brian Borstein, that one of the most eye-opening things that you can do is looking up pages or YouTube channels where physiotherapists are showing you how you can stretch out certain muscles. And if you look up how you can stretch out the latissimus dorsi, what you will see is that this is not what they are showing, that you should just put your arm up here and that will nicely stretch it out. What they will actually show you is kind of pulling your arm across, like it will be kind of up a little bit, forward and across your body. And if you do this, and if you put your hand at your lats, I mean, it's so crystal clear that this is stretching out the lats like crazy. And honestly, since I have experienced this, all the pulling movements that I'm doing and the execution of all of them became so much more intuitive. And I just intuitively started feeling like what would be the best way to execute them. So that is the lats that I'm hitting if that's what I want to hit, and not so much upper back, not so much arms. There's much less weird impinging feeling in my shoulders because I intuitively move in the plane that is ideal for the muscle, but is not trying to take my joints through ranges of motion that they're just not suited for. And that's kind of a very intuitive thing. Like, if really this was the best way to stimulate the muscle, like, would your connective tissue structure impede you from that if you didn't have like a serious pre-existing injury there? So I started doing chin-ups differently, pull-downs differently, lat prayers, which I always kind of swore by. But there was always this thing like, okay, if I'm just executing it in the wrong kind of rhythm, angle, whatever, I'm getting this really weird impingement feeling in my shoulders. Honestly, I started doing them with one arm in a way so that I actually got like this really nasty lat cramp after that. It has never, ever, ever happened to me before. So much so that I actually took a picture of myself, and that's by far the beefiest my back ever looked. And I took that picture honestly because I just held up a little handheld mirror before that, and I checked myself in the big mirror behind me, and I could see that my lats were like actually pumped up visibly, which again, never happened. So this slightly narrower plane of movement, so raising the arm up and pulling it back in a more narrow plane and a little bit across the body, these things hit my lats better than pretty much anything that I've done before. Now, the question will naturally arise at this point, what about then things like wide grip pull-ups? I would say that wide grip pull-ups will definitely hit the lats. And by the way, again, side note, I don't think any of these biomechanics gurus will say that the wide grip pull-up doesn't hit the lats. So I think it's kind of a strawman argument that a lot of people are making. It's definitely not true that it will only be upper back. Like adduction is definitely one of the functions of the lats, and you can even feel it. Like your arms are up here, you pull them back in here, you definitely feel the lats moving even. So there's no question that they will build them. The main issue is with the wide grip pull-up is that you're just not putting the lats under a great deal of stretch. And, stretch under load, I mean, that is pretty much unanimously agreed upon, except, who is the only trained with bands, and that's like 3 times as much muscle growth, or 300 times more muscle growth, I'm forgetting. Except him, everybody agrees pretty much that a big stretch on the muscle is like an independent and fantastic way to stimulate muscle growth. And again, like, feel your lat stretching this way, like forward, slightly across, and slightly up. Feel your lat stretching now, feel it now. I mean, there's no comparison. So I view wide grip pull-ups a little bit like a concentration curl for the biceps versus something like either like an incline curl, or not even incline curl because that's actually kind of fucked up, but like let's say a cable curl, like the cable resistance is coming from behind you, and feel what your biceps is doing that way. Or, like a preacher curl, hopefully not in a... Anyway, don't tear your biceps, please. But, like some variation of a preacher curl, like there, you can actually feel like a pretty big stretch on the biceps. If you're doing a concentration curl where your forearm is basically completely vertical, there's a ton of tension at the top, but basically nothing at the bottom. Or like an alternating dumbbell curl if you're standing with 2 dumbbells. They're definitely valid and very legitimate bicep movements, but one could argue that like there's another variation that, because of the bigger stretch, is a bit more effective, if we accept even that, having a big stretch is going to be a good thing for muscle growth. Now, does this mean that from now on we should not do any kind of wide grip pulls at all? No, don't go all in on any kind of promising idea. So yes, this is going to put your lats under a bigger stretch than putting it out here. However, you still feel the contraction here. Maybe it will hit some slightly different areas of the lats. So, maybe don't exclude those altogether. I haven't, for the record, although I do much, much less of them than anything else. And definitely do include some narrower pulls, like one arm pull downs, close grip pull downs, close grip chin ups, and things like this, if you haven't so far. I can tell you on pull-ups, so because I'm sure I will get some comments as well saying that like pull-ups did more for me than anything else. I can guarantee you that you haven't done more pull-ups than I did. Like basically pull-ups, like wide grip pull-ups and chin-ups, like if there are movements that I never, ever, 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 ever stopped doing since the first day I stepped into the gym up until today, is those 2 movements. And you can clearly see the result of that in my case, at least. Pretty good upper back, some width, yes, some width for sure, but the lats are just not prominent. They just don't really have the contour around it, that shape and that pop. Now, could that be simply because of the lacking erector muscles underneath, that those are not developed enough? It could be. However, I would say I'm training my lats very differently now for a year. Also have bigger erector muscles, no question. And like the differences are visible. So I think I have at least a somewhat valid case study for, well, this is what you do if you change your training with these pull variations. So anyways, that's about what I wanted to say on the lats. And now I would like to go for another point. And that is basically resurrecting the respect of the row. So I used to be one of those people who did a ton of vertical pulls and not so much horizontal pulls. And it's mainly because I believed that basically vertical pulls can do everything that horizontal pulls do, almost everything, but some things they just do much, much better. So my thinking was that, okay, like horizontal pulls will be mainly upper back, and then vertical pulls will also be some upper back, but they will be much more lats and, you know, also better for other muscles like the biceps. So why not just do a lot more vertical pulls? The thing is that now I realize that you can actually hit the lats very well with some row variations as well. It's all about how you're setting things up. So if you're sitting on, let's say, chest supported row machine, and you slightly turn away from the angle of the pull. So let's say you're pulling with your left hand, you're turning a little bit to your left side, and you're pulling across a little bit. I mean, again, just tap your lats and you will feel how it is stretching out. So I realized this, and once again, I also realized that the fact that something is really good for the upper back, and even if it potentially wasn't that great for something else, I mean, man, the upper back is so important to have it be really well developed. So I actually at this point do a fair amount of horizontal pulling. I do at least 10 sets a week, often actually closer to 20, and I do all kinds of variations. I do these one arm rows, which are more so for lats. I do some wider grip rows, which are more so for upper back. And I also actually do a fair amount of Arnold style rowing, where I'm basically hinging from the hip. So I will hinge forward as far as I can, basically. I mean, I will arch my lower back the whole time. At the end of it, it will slightly tilt over to this flat angle, and my pelvis is tilting over somewhat, but the lower back arch will still remain to some degree at least. And I can basically reach forward with my arms. That will actually be a pretty decent lat exercise once again. And then I will kind of hinge back to a more straight torso position, and then I will pull my elbows in as well. I mean, that is basically an all-round back builder. Erector spinae muscles, upper back, lats, I mean, it will hit everything. I try to be more and more efficient with my exercise selection, and sometimes I will pick an exercise like this, which is a little bit of a jack of all trades exercise, maybe not the ideal stimulus for any given muscle within the movement, but it is really good for a lot of them. So I think this is a good way to economize on time. And I also do some one arm cable rows where I'm basically bracing against my knee with one hand, and then I will be pulling with the other. I actually think that some of these row variations are actually very decent for the lats as well, like I said. And I'm almost inclined to think that when bodybuilders always said that, okay, so pull downs or wide grip pull-ups for width and then rows for thickness, I mean, in some case, it could be argued that it's the other way around. Like, you know, a pull-off variation, especially if you're not pulling your elbows in, but like you're pulling with them like outward. If you're doing something like that, then I mean, it can be argued that this is better for thickness, and then a dumbbell row where like you're really reaching forward, that could be argued that is better for width, because that will actually hit the lats pretty decently. So yes, I'm definitely a much bigger believer in rows than I used to be. And yeah, if you're one of those people to whom I said that rows are not that great, or redundant rather, I apologize. I changed my opinion actually a long time ago, but now I came clean about that. Maybe actually a fourth point here, which is kind of a side note, but I think it could be important, is one thing I realized is that doing rear delt isolation work, it could actually be a bit of a redundant thing for many people, because the thing is that the rear delts are one of those muscles like the front delts that will get involved in almost every pulling movement that you're doing. Yes, maybe with the pulling movements in your routine that you currently have, it will not be the ideal line of pull, but it will still get so much volume that it could be argued that it's still redundant. You know, like at a certain point, just sheer volume of work can make up for suboptimalities in, you know, fulfilling the biomechanical role of a muscle. So if you're doing a chin-up, is that the ideal movement for the rear delts? No, but it is still going to be involved pretty heavily. If you're doing a wide grip pull-up where you're pulling your elbows in to let it contract nicely, is that the ideal movement? No, but it will be involved heavily. Basically, almost the same thing could be said for every single pulling movement that you have in your routine. So for that reason, I think that doing things like reverse flies and whatever, it's kind of just, I wouldn't say a waste of time, although it could actually be, but I would say that you probably would be better off doing something else in many cases. The thing is that legging rear delts, it's actually a lot less common, I think, amongst lifters than a lot of lifters think. I think what is going on is that a lot of lifters just don't know how to flex the rear delts. Like, I thought that I have no rear delts at all. And then I was holding this handheld mirror once again. I was just playing around with posing, and all of a sudden they just popped. And I was like, whoa, I have rear delts. That's good news. Is it the freakiest rear delts ever? No, but most people don't have the freakiest rear delts, even if they train them a shit ton. Just like with any muscle, like freaky anything is going to have for, you know, like 1 out of 20 people in most cases. So Soták Andrej, for example, he has amazing rear delts. Mine are not like his, but a lot of that is genetics, because like he had rear delts like that, like, you know, 10 years ago almost. So yeah, that would be kind of a fourth point. So I'm just gonna go through really quickly all the points that I mentioned. So for one thing, there is more to the back than just lat training. Don't just focus on the lats. Erector spinae muscles, I think, are hugely important, which in practice means do some hip hinges, heavy, load them progressively. Of course, if you can. If you can't, then do something else, such as dedicated and safe exercises conservatively with conservative loading, but progressive loading that are dynamic movements. So back extensions with the hip blocked, maybe Jefferson curls, like deadlift, Jefferson curl combo, even reverse hypers if you have access to that. You could do some sort of a hip hinge like twice a week, maybe 1.5 times a week. And then you could do like maybe 1 or 2 times a week, some other kind of lower back specific movement if you're like me and this was a big lagging area for you. So don't neglect the spinal erector muscles, definitely not. It contributes to your aesthetic outlook hugely. Upper back muscles are also important, and that's why, if for nothing else, rows are important to have in your program, albeit they will be hit by other exercises as well, like pull-ups, chin-ups, things like that. But some sort of row variation I think is good, where the elbows are actually flared out. And if you want to hit the lats, even though there's more to the back than just the lats, but you definitely want to hit the lats optimally, I think narrower pulls are great. And luckily, it's not just me and a couple of nutcases from the biomechanics world that think that. Dorian Yates himself always emphasized that there was not a single pull-up in this. It was all narrow pulls, like one-arm pull-downs, pullovers, things like that. So I think narrower pulls are better for at least stretching out the lats. The stretch is pretty important for every other muscle, so why not the lats? I think those should dominate your training for lat training. Wide grip pull-ups are fine. I don't think they are the ideal movement for the lats, but probably it's a good idea to have some wide, more vertical pulls in your program as well. And rows are definitely something not to be scoffed at, and rows can also train the lats, which is kind of maybe embarrassing to say, but a revelation of mine. Otherwise, just for kind of shits and giggles, I'm going to share with you what I've been doing for the most part for my back training for a good number of months now, and I actually built up for some insane volumes. That could actually be a fifth point. Like, the back can have some pretty insane volume tolerance actually if you build up to it. I think in part is because like you can just never put these muscles under such an insane stretch like the hamstrings or the chest. But you know, most of you will probably not need volumes like this. But so I used to have a narrow pull day, a wide pull day, and then a horizontal pull day. So it would be something like workout A would be chin-ups, then some kind of a one-arm pull down, and then some kind of a straight arm pull down like lat prayer, one-arm lat prayer, diagonal lat prayer, things like this. Workout B would be wide grip pull-ups, wide grip pull-downs, and then some kind of a wide grip row. And then workout C would be usually 2 one-arm row variants and then 1 bilateral row variant. So like in total, this would be like just this that I listed here would be like 30 sets or so. And then on top of that, I would do RDLs or 1 RDL, 1 good morning, but like 2 hip hinge sessions basically a week. So that would be like a total of like 6 sets. And then on top of that, I would do like another 6 erector spinae isolation work. So I would do back extensions or these Jefferson curl thingies. So basically like 12-ish sets for the lower back. And then, you know, so just this would be like 42 sets or so. And then, you know, over time I actually built it up. So what was now 42 in this example was closer to like 70 in some cases in my routine. I kind of go back and forth on this. To be honest, what I'm finding is that with things like the back, except for the lower back, so with the erector spinae muscles, I would never go crazy on the volume. But what I'm finding is that, you know, this like upper mid back area, this is something that the only thing that is preventing me now from doing like 100 sets, honestly, is just time and energy and getting bored by doing a bunch of sets. Like, it's just really hard for me to conceive a scenario where I could not recover from still another set of chest supported rows. Like, because these muscles are like really hard to get sore, even when you really try to stretch them out, like you just cannot stretch them out that much. They just heal more quickly because there is less damage to begin with. If you build up to it gradually, I think they can tolerate some ridiculous volumes. But anyways, that would be kind of like an example of what you could be doing. And I honestly think that you could actually do the routine that I depicted here. You could just do it on non-back-to-back sessions. So you could do this like workout A, narrow, workout B, wide, workout C, horizontal, and then some extra like lower back builders. Like you could do this, just not like 7 days a week, like repeat, repeat, repeat. You could just do like Monday, you do workout A, Wednesday, you do workout B, and Friday, workout C, something like that. I mean, of course, this was not the totality of my workouts just for the back. This is what I've been doing. But yeah, so yeah, some thoughts on back training here. And yeah, I think with that, I'm going to sign out for now because kind of been recording for a long time.